Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to Alexa to introduce herself first.
Awesome, thank you. My name is Alexa Berriochoa. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 25 years old and I'm in Seattle, Washington. I am the outreach and digital content vista for the Seattle chapter of Skate Like a Girl. So, and a little bit about my connection to skating and Skate Like a Girl. I started skating when I was 12. And then when I moved to Seattle, I came out as trans and immediately kind of stopped skating. Just because I thought there really wasn't a lot of space left in it for me. And so it wasn't until I found Skate Like a Girl and women in trans sessions put on by Skate Like a Girl specifically, that I felt welcomed and invited again to be like a part of skateboarding. So after that, I wanted to get involved with Skate Like a Girl. So I started working like summer camps with them. And then I took on an Up to Us role with them as a coach, like working after school programs and doing some more of like the front end delivery of programming. So we had outreach programs, after school programs, summer camps, WT sessions, and then moved into a Vista position, and that's where I'm at now. So yeah, if you've not heard of Skate Like a Girl, we are a nonprofit organization that's looking to promote inclusivity and social justice in skateboarding. We're based in 3 different chapters in the US, being San Francisco Bay Area, Seattle, which is where our headquarters are at, and then Portland as well. But yeah, I also make some content for Instagram and TikTok that's got a big focus on like beginner resources and educational content. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I've got about me.
Awesome, thanks, Alexa. Brody, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I guess it's working, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm at the studio, so it might be a little noisy, but no one will come in the room, so it'll be private. Yeah, I'm Brody Polinsky. I live in Berlin, and what do I do? I guess we had a quick chat to discuss what is the purpose of me being here? What can I bring to the table? So I use they, them pronouns, non-binary trans person. And yeah, a number of projects on the go. Skateboarded all of my waking hours since like as many as I could anyways, living in a northern climate since like 1986, I guess. And that has given me the most space internally to feel safe I've ever experienced until picking up meditation in sobriety. So yeah, I've also been sober, I guess 19 years in a couple weeks, maybe a week. And yeah, my goodness. So projects that are relevant, I guess life experience is relevant, but as far as I've been doing this skateboard, everything's come from this these front-facing projects I've been doing are created from the space I'm sitting in, which is once was my home, but it's a queer tattoo studio. And it has been now for 7 years or so. From this space, developed a skateboard company, which is something I can't believe it took this long to do, a queer skateboard company. It's called UNIV. And yeah, a fine art practice, do this podcast, and we're almost at the stages, a couple months of putting out a book around the queer tattoo community that should be, I guess, even on the shelves, published like mid-November. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, that maybe that's a good umbrella overview. Thank you for having me.
That's perfect, Brody, thanks. Alison, let's go over to you.
Sure, thanks, Amber. Hi, I'm Alison Carney. I use she, her pronouns. And why I am here. This actually is a conversation that I have been really excited that is starting to happen in the sector of sport for social good, which is the sector in which I work. I am an independent consultant and I support mostly sport for social good programs or sport for development programs on gender equity and equality work. And so that for a long time has been just about girls. And as I'll talk about in a bit, it really needs to be opened and thought about. So, and I guess following the group, sharing a bit of my personal experience, I'm not a skateboarder and I can tell you I don't have a deep connection to it, but I have so much respect for the work that the Goodpush Alliance has been doing, and the idea of learning communities and sharing is something I feel really passionate about the way that we can continue to grow a movement that is inclusive and aimed towards social change. And I will share that I am a soccer player. And I know that's probably not the most popular thing to say, but I should say that my interest in this comes from being a queer soccer player for a long time and having a lot of friends who are trans identified, who were therefore not able to play on our female only team. So that's kind of where my motivation for this work comes from. And that's it.
That's great. Thank you, Alison. Catrin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Similarly to Alison, I haven't got much of a connection to skateboarding. I'm actually a rugby player. So at least it's better than soccer. And I work for, sorry, Alison. I work for a charity called School of Hard Knocks, and we use rugby as a vehicle for social change. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we do, because we're speaking in a bit. But yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me. We're really excited to hear about some of the fantastic work that you guys are doing, and to share a little bit about our journey, you know, and why I'm so passionate about this. So exciting stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Catrin. Do we have Sarah? Has she joined? Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I am actually a board member for Skate Like a Girl, which Alexa spoke about. And then my day-to-day job is with Zoomies. And so I work there, and due to all the work with Skate Like a Girl, this is super important. And I've just learned so much from being on the board and working with Alexa and everyone there. And so I just want to continue to grow everything, all my knowledge about this, and be a part of the change for good. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Do we, oh, it's so great. I'm glad that you introduced yourself. Do we also have Sarah and Gwenya from Skateistan? Let's have a look.
She's here, so maybe we just need to unmute. Saw her. She's here, but we can't hear her.
Okay. Should we start with the, yeah, well, let's start with the speakers. So Alexa, over to you.
I'm sorry, what was that?
There's another person that we wanted to introduce, but we're struggling with audio, so we're going to jump straight into your 10-minute slot, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah. So can we come back to me? Is it okay if I go,
no
like,
worries, no worries at all.
I'm so sorry.
Don't worry at all. Brody?
The eminent hot seat, the first one to share. In a meeting, I'm usually in no way shy to share in and around recovery. So, I'm continually developing how important it is to be mindful of my privilege, because I mean, a number of things. One of them, having grown up in Canada, having a roof over my head as a kid, having gone to school, the privilege of education and a healthcare system that we all got. The most I've ever paid for healthcare in my life is in Canada was like $50 a month, and now in Germany you add another zero to it. But I'm still very grateful because I grew up in a Western. The things I took for granted being Western, let alone being a white person in particular, having a passport that is looked upon favorably in the world, getting into Germany, where I've been now the last 8 years, gratefully, to hunker down and really work on myself. Because basically, I've learned that centering my own wellness can give me the ability to then be present for other people. And yeah, not making any assumptions about anybody. So, you know, until I saw a good demonstration, until I saw several demonstrations of what my gender could look like and what my career could look like, and you know, so it's really about being. It can very well be something that's super powerful for others if one just leads like a, you know, a healthy life. Like until I saw what recovery looked like for other people, what alternative relationship dynamics. I'm also polyamorous. You know, I think that's it's a word that doesn't really do justice. I think identifiers and qualifiers are really important, and they've helped me find a sense of stability and community, but it's so much about bringing my best version of myself to the table each day. So I do that with about 3 hours of spiritual practice in the morning prior to leaving the house, to either be a friend or a business owner person, or a tattooer or a fine artist or a person in recovery, or even just someone going into the grocery store, so I don't react to the world around me, you know? So it's about unconditioning the world, you know, my perception of the world from the inside out. So until I noticed through much recovery, in particular meditation twice a day, as my nervous system started to heal, I wasn't reacting. So I realized that people were responding to me differently. And so when I go into the world, even in this practice of tattooing, which I did up until the minute this meeting started, like actually I was taking a picture and Rhiannon's calling. I'm like, yes, I'm almost ready. I wasn't ready. Where am I going with this? I noticed through having this space and me healing, which is such an active process, and it's like a lifelong process. People were feeling safer in this space, and I was perpetuating this queer space and tattooing in the last 7 years, which was an unusual thing then. And the people who were coming here were feeling embodied, and that's it's such a gift, because really I had to center. It seems really selfish, but in an Eastern context, it's not in any way selfish to center yourself. But in a Western context, it very much is. And I think with, you know, anyways, where I'm going with this is skateboarding. You know, I've walked into skate parks all of my life and immediately was confronted with something I didn't understand, which was how people perceived me due to the outside, that not only do I dress a certain way, but I choose to present it. People's perception of how my gender is presented due to the way that I look and maybe the certain communities that I engage in, I'm seen a certain way. So in a way I have this like another additional layer of privilege, which is like a cloak. Like I have, my insides don't match my outsides, and my insides are private and they're mine. And so I can choose to bring people into what is actually going on my inside in a kind of more of a private environment. So within the world of my creativity, I kind of put it a little bit on the front so that people can feel attracted to it and they can feel safe to come here to either buy fine art or get a tattoo or whatever. But in skateboarding, it's so private. It's such a hyper masculine, difficult place to break in, because it's this, in my experience, skateboarding is a subculture. So often in subcultures, people other each other, which is such a pity, but it's like this, once you're allowed in the gate and you've passed the border and you're in, it's quite often, it's not as gentle as I hope it can become. And that's where, like, if I go to the skate park, I go there and if my friends aren't there and I can't connect with my friends, I really feel dysphoric and I feel completely dissociated. And so if I'm in a skate park with 50, 30 or 20 people, there's another person in that space, 2 or 3 people even, that are feeling the same way. But if I'm not willing to be transparent about who I am, they wouldn't know that I feel that way. So going to, well, there's this amazing initiative in Berlin with these folks. It's called HERA, which it's probably already come up, but I was a couple minutes late. But it was a really great initiative for female identified trans and non-binary people called HERA. And I know these people, but I still don't feel comfortable going there. And that's just my thing, you know, because like I have a certain presentation that at this stage still has me feeling like my feet are on the ground. So it's been an initiative through doing the skateboard company in particular that's front facing as a queer company that centers voices who are, I guess maybe a little surprising, where you're like, oh, I would have no idea if you weren't forward about who you are, that I actually can identify with you and I can feel maybe potentially a little bit safer in one's skin. And that's very much what actually within my tattoo practice, people often get a sense of. They come here to feel embodied. And due to me repressing gender for so many years, it's something that I've never, basically being a tattooer for some years now, I've noticed there's 3 groups of people for the most part. There's people who come to get tattooed to embody themselves, which is kind of a smaller group of people. The largest demographic are people who are just getting tattooed for shits and giggles, which I think is really quite amazing. I think it's just like the spontaneous people that, you know, they're very present, they're living in the moment. And then there's the other group of people who are, I would say, the second most people who are maybe addicted to getting tattooed, and they're also essentially trying to cover up. They're maybe not comfortable with themselves. And that was very much who I was. And I was completely blind to that. Even though my body knew, my head wouldn't allow that past into cognizance that I was repressing gender. So I hold this space knowing that a lot of people coming in here aren't necessarily cognizant. They haven't connected the mind and the body yet. So I'm grateful that I can be a neutral space where people from different experiences can come here. And I think that's something that skateboarding is missing. And for me, that takes communication. Communication is one of the most important things that can break down barriers and boundaries, especially within these marginalized subcultures where, as much as what people say, and the general consensus is that skateboarding is really inclusive. I don't know when the last time you went to a skate park was, but it's tough. But it's very dependent on where you are, you know, and if you're in like Berlin's very left and very social. And so people have time and energy to skate here, you know, like if you live in like London or New York or LA, you hustle so hard that if you go to skate, it's like a kind of like a privilege. And here people have lots of time to skate. So I think there's more time to like break past those boundaries with people, get to know them a little more and be like, oh, what's your pronouns? And you can potentially assume, instead of assuming, you can be willing to gravitate towards people with a similar experience that you can, for me, I can feel embodied and not feel that my feet aren't attached to my body. And as soon as my feet aren't attached to my body, I hurt myself. And I hurt myself anyways, but you know, if I go to a skate park and I'm not present with myself, I haven't checked in with myself, I tend to just feel all left feet, and I'm like, I can't connect with people, and I don't necessarily have fun because I'm dissociated and dysphoric, and I don't want that for anybody. So I think culture around skateboarding, where people come to the skate park and everybody says hello to each other straight away, is a really powerful tool that is more prevalent in America, which I really appreciate about American skateboard culture, is they often say there's a lot of like colloquial hellos, and like people are willing to, at least on the surface, try and be cordial to one another. Yeah. So all of the projects that I do and that I continue to put time and energy into are important to me as like a passion project. None of them are financially viable. And it's nice to see that it's so many people doing similar, on the same path. And I think we need more of that as a community, and especially after Corona, where we're all starting, I speak for myself, getting used to being around people again. And yeah, I'm not sure what time I have to share, but that's probably plenty. Thank you.
That was perfect, Brody. Thank you. Especially, yeah, what you were saying about people that kind of, there's this assumption that skateboarding's super inclusive. And I hear it all the time, especially in social skate work, where people say, you know, oh, skateboarding breaks down barriers of race, class, and gender. But it always seems to be cis white men that are saying it. And I kind of wonder how they'd know. So it's something that I think is definitely like, there's more that we can be doing, and like, rather than just saying like, hey, if we give them a skateboard, then they'll just have all the privilege in the world. But that was awesome. That was great to hear from you, Brody. And I'm sure you'll get some interesting questions later on. Alison, are you up for going next?
We should ask Kat too, because we're kind of together in ours.
Yeah, Alison.
Tag team in.
Yeah, Kat, you ready?
I'm in.
Okay. Okay, I'll start. And I am going to share a few slides, and I know it's just to make it give you all a visual a bit of what I'm talking about. Wonderful. I think this is a good follow on what Brody was just saying, because I was just thinking the whole basis of the project I'm about to talk about was conversations around our sport for good in general. I'm going to talk about sport for good because it's what I work with, not just skateboarding, but are we actually inclusive? And there's a lot on websites, in conferences everywhere. There's a lot of this. We work on gender, we do gender justice, we're inclusive, like we are changing the world. And this question started to come up with everyone I work with, not everyone, let me correct myself, but a lot of people I work with, that is that actually the case? And so what I'm going to talk about is this year, Kat was very involved in this as part of the group that we did this research together, which is I was funded by the Laureate Sport for Good Foundation to start asking this question to some organizations about how are they beginning to be more inclusive of trans and non-binary communities, basically. And a lot of them are at the very beginning of this process, but it was a really nice way to start a conversation. And our objective of doing this research and starting the conversations was to provide more resources, provide more insights, and maybe give some practical actions to people who just don't have that access and don't have that experience yet. And I was just going to show. So the first thing I was going to show you is actually, before we started the research, I run a gender learning community for the Laureate Foundation. And years ago, when we started the community, we created this impact statement that was, girls are not limited by their gender in future plans and et cetera. This is all of the organizations together are working toward social change that would make more opportunities for girls and make them feel that they can take on those opportunities. And in 2019, we had 2 or 3 members of the group who said, wait a second, let's change the statement. Let's start to think about what does this look like in a bigger way. We still think it's really important to work with girls because of the many reasons they're left out of sport and everything else. But there's also a lot of people who don't identify as a cis girl who are also really struggling to be involved. So I just wanted to share that as some of the thinking of mine that went into this research. And also just that I've done work in research in the past talking about sexuality in sport. And I think this conversation around trans and non-binary inclusion and representation within the sport for good field is really connected to this conversation on queer experiences and sexuality, although the research I did focused specifically on trans and non-binary experiences. These are the projects that were involved in the research piece. And I'm going to call it a research piece, but also kind of a community of practice, because what we did is we had regular meetings where I was doing interviews with different members of these organizations, participants, program managers, coaches, and then I'd feed back to the group what I was finding out. And we'd have conversations about someone just did a training for their staff, or someone else had this challenge because parents weren't really being open to how they were talking about queerness in their community. And we just had these 2-hour calls every, I think it was once a month, Kat, I can't remember, maybe once every 2 months. And it became, so it was it's a piece of research that was created out of that community. And we're still continuing those conversations and learning from each other. Skateistan in South Africa, thank you, Talia, and in Bali, were involved in those conversations. And I just wanted to share some of the things that came out of that, which are Slum Soccer in India, who was one of the ones involved, are partnered with Play Proud, which is an initiative started by the Street Football World Network. And they're just trying to improve the capacity of their staff to support the queer community where they are, and also connect with resources that are already existing in their community that they didn't know about. And then another one, I just love this photo of our friends in Belfast in Northern Ireland who changed their logo to be more inclusive because they realized it was something that the young people they work with told them they needed them to do. So that's the kind of stuff that we were talking about. And not to end this on barriers, but to kind of open up for Kat to continue, some of the key barriers that all of these organizations, who are all different sports and in different places in the world, were talking about is that, one, trans inclusion has not been a priority when there hasn't been LGBTQI identified staff members. Another one is that their coaches or whoever is doing the outreach with the young people in the community often don't have the language and knowledge about the transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming community, and therefore feel very fearful about how to even begin that conversation and begin creating space. Oh, I put a timer on for myself, and I'll just quickly finish, Kat. That organizations also have fear of putting the program and participants in danger, especially in more conservative communities where promoting the LGBTQI community might be seen as not okay. So we had conversations around that. And just then a general lack of information and knowledge and resources on how to do this better, how to better serve the trans and non-binary community. And that my last point is just that I really apologize that this research is not available yet. We created the research, and we also created a first steps guide. I've called it first steps because it's really like basic first steps of ideas for actions that you can take to start to be more inclusive. And I'm waiting on Laureus to release this, but I will let everyone know when it is. And that's it, Kat, I'll turn over to you.
Cool, okay. So it's worth just explaining a little bit about School of Hard Knocks. Like I said, we are a charity that uses rugby as a vehicle of social change. 2 main programs, one working in schools. We're a UK-wide charity, but I just run the Welsh bit. And so we work in schools with about 600 young people every week. Same young people we work with over a period of 3 years. And we've got an adult program as well that works with adults with challenging barriers to reaching their potential. And we work with them to, help them to do just that, just to realize their potential. And we were really not at all inclusive in the way that we were delivering our services, to the point that we identified our courses as the man's course, or the female, or the girls course, or the boys course. And it wasn't until we had a trans participant come on our course that we were sort of selling it to Dan in a job centre, and started saying, oh, so the Wednesday course, and just realized that actually our language was just completely inappropriate and just excluded the trans and non-binary community. And so we worked with Dan, who was just brilliant and the best tutor to us. We built a relationship with him, and he was very comfortable in helping us improve the way that we were doing things, the language that we were using, and just giving us some really invaluable feedback as to what we were doing well, but also what we really should be improving on. When I asked Dan why he came to the course, given that our language wasn't the most inclusive on our courses, he basically said it was because it was largely queer staff who were recruiting. And that made him feel like potentially this was a safe space. Since then, we've come a long way. So we have changed the language that we use on our marketing materials. We've really worked hard on imagery and making sure that people can see people who, you know, look like them, people who dress like them, people who they can just identify with on our imagery. And we have trained all frontline staff on how to be better at this stuff. We are in no ways, you know, we're not experts in any of this, but like Alison said, we knew that because, you know, people were potentially scared of getting it wrong, just wasn't a good enough reason to not try. And so what I thought I would do is just share a little bit of the training that I shared with staff and just pick up some of the key points of that and the stuff that we had the most interesting kind of discussions around. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that? Yeah, perfect. Okay. Let me just click on it. So this is the stuff that the training covered. So just, you know, useful terms, why it was so important that we were doing this, some myth busting. So we heard from some trans voices talk about some, you know, some of the myths, trying to look at some of the concerns and some of the reasons why people were you know, the excuses people are using is to not, you know, be better at this sort of stuff, and not to improve their language and the way that we deliver our services. How we can specifically apply some of this learning to School of Hard Knocks, how we can improve our messaging, some good practice that was out there, so some people who were just doing this better than we were, and looked at what we could learn from them, and then identify kind of guidance and training resources and just some really cool stuff that we could use in our delivery, and then identify, right, how are we going to change our practice, you know, now that we've done all this sort of work. So we did some just really basic looking at terms and just breaking down some of the language. We looked at our messaging specifically. All staff started to you know, introduce themselves with their pronouns and invited others to do the same. We changed our imagery. We made sure that our imagery was more inclusive, and our language improved. And we also looked at it from a participant's point of view. So why would our trans participants, you know, feeling that this was a safe space for them? Why would they stay and why were they coming back? But also put yourselves in a trans person's shoes. Are we doing well enough to you know, to give them the confidence to come? We identify some good practice, and this is kind of what came of you know, speaking to the staff, and we almost made these sort of commitments as to this is what we would do going forward. And you know, some of the key stuff came, you know, at the bottom of this list. So let's promise each other to call out discrimination, but also let's support each other to get this right. And let's not let the fear of getting it wrong stop us from, you know, from trying. I found some useful resources. So the thing with rugby is, you know, there was just some questions that kept coming up around facilities, around contact. And so we looked for some guidance. Interestingly, there's not much, and the stuff that's out there isn't always great. And so, you know, sort of round two of hopefully what Alison and I are going to be working on is looking at developing guides specifically for schools around, you know, how they can be better and how they can be more inclusive. But also specifically working with the national governing body, the WRU, looking at the guidance that they're putting out, and how useful it is practically. And then this is what we ended with. So we made everyone kind of make a commitment as to what they were going to do more of, or what they were going to change to improve how inclusive their delivery is. And I thought I'd just finish with, during the pandemic, we ran an online course, and we met a young guy called Catrin who came on our course. And in the graduation ceremony at the end of it, Catrin said that it was the first time that he'd ever been involved in a group, but he wasn't misgendered. And then he went on just to say kind of how that made him feel. And if ever there was a moment that kind of reinforced the importance of us doing this work and, you know, trying to be better and genuinely, you know, working to be more inclusive, it was that. I think that it is no coincidence that since then we've had trans participants on almost all of our programs, if not all of them. And since going back, interestingly, since going back to schools, since the lockdown that we had here in the UK, we have so many more trans young people, and the schools are actually coming to us so they can see us leading with, you know, just some small changes that are making a big difference. So using pronouns and changing our language, and providing, you know, gender inclusive facilities. And they're coming to us to ask us on, you know, some guidance and to help them with being better at it and how they can better support the young trans people in their schools, which is super exciting and terrifying all at once. But we are absolutely up for the challenge. And so yes, that's just a little bit about our journey very early on, but that's where we've started.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like a journey. Alexa, are you ready for us to go over to you now?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. So I kind of wanted to speak directly to the importance of inclusive spaces for queer and trans people inside skateboarding through the things I've experienced at Skate Like a Girl and through my personal experience. So being that that's a statement about being inclusive exclusively, that can feel a bit paradoxical. But I think that that is something that's been talked about in queer skate circles a lot. And I think that it's necessary for trans and queer people to be able to be given those exclusive spaces, especially kids, because like I had mentioned in my intro, like skateboarding was something that I had deliberately distanced myself from. Because a lot of the worst toxicity, as was mentioned earlier, like being that it's such a hyper masculine subculture, there is this like kind of presence around the skate park. And I had seen like a lot of the worst like homophobia and transphobia that I'd experienced at a skate park. So by the time that I came out as trans, I was ready to be like, all right, I'm done with skateboarding because I know how it's like traditionally held space. And so I don't think that there's like a really inviting environment for me to be there. And so I didn't realize that there were inclusive spaces that had been made for queer people specifically. And it wasn't until like going into that space, I was able to be invited by like an entirely new side of skateboarding that I'd never seen before. And those kind of things are really important for me, sure, as an adult, but especially for kids, because there are so many queer and trans spaces that are based specifically around like going to bars and drinking. And like, I think that it's really empowering to be able to be like, hey, we're here to share space and like do something that we all enjoy and also hold affinity around queerness. And kids don't really have access to a lot of those things. And something that's really important there that I want to highlight as well is that a lot of the times when we talk about like queer and trans inclusion or queer and trans presence in sports and in skateboarding, it's usually as a topic of like, well, is it valid? Like, and the debate of like, should we allow trans women in competitive sports, like alongside other women? And so I think like being deliberate about making sure that that space is created, especially for kids, is something that should be prioritized, because nobody should ever be able to tell a kid, especially, that like they're not allowed to chase their dream, they're not allowed to be everything that they want. And it takes just like a little bit of nuance on our end to make sure the parameters of skateboarding are ready to accept that. And I think that that's something to take a good look at, because it feels like a surface level question, because if we take like a little bit more of a dig at it, we already separate based on ability level. So there are already parameters and structure, but I think that those are things that are often not inclusive in skateboarding that we should be prioritizing for youth, especially. But yeah, going back to a bit of the experience that I've had with Skate Like a Girl and WT session, there is just like a presence around that kind of space that is only really like acceptable and holdable by like trans and queer people of and on themselves, that is necessary to like keep our community at the forefront. And I think that a skateboarding that's homogenized is not a skateboarding worth really being supported. Like I've seen so many cis white men do tray flips down 8 stairs. Like I don't care anymore. Like I would much rather see like a trans person do their first kickflip than ever watch like the same exact thing be done. And it's because there's like an access to resources that they have that we traditionally haven't. And I think that that's a really big topic of discussion as well, is that when it comes to like gender inclusion and the conversations at hand around like, oh, well, she's good for a girl, or like those kinds of things that happen, I think that that's traditionally a statement that's been able to hold weight, because when you show up to a skate park, you are immediately greeted by the people that look like you. So if you're like a cis white man at a skate park, a cis white man at a skate park, you're allowed to fail, you're allowed to make mistakes. And so this really props up that idea of like those exclusive, inclusive spaces for us, because everybody I think has probably seen what happens when women, queer people show up to a skate park and they start to fail on their first day like everybody else does. They're immediately like, ah, she's not a real skater, she's just like here to impress boys, or like that person's like obviously just like in it for the style, or like whatever. Whereas like people are allowed to, cis men are allowed to show up, and cis boys are allowed to show up and fail until they get it right, which is space that is so important to have. Something that was mentioned earlier as well is like, there is this associated feeling with being trans or queer in a skate park that starts to make you feel like all eyes are on you, and like you're dissociative and dysphoric. And that is the single most important thing that I've been able to really experience and share with others at Skate Like a Girl, is the ability to like wash those feelings away. And people approach me a lot of the times like, oh, I want to get into skateboarding so bad, but I'm just so scared to show up to a skate park. Like I couldn't do that. I couldn't put myself out there. And I'm always like, you got to come to WT. Like, please come to WT. I'm begging you. Because every single time I've brought anybody into one of those exclusive spaces, they always end up having such a good time, because we have like such a supportive and like-minded and like identity affinity group of people that are not going to treat you with that toxicity that makes people fearful and that we shouldn't have to put up with. But we're working on fixing skateboarding, right? But like, it's not going to happen tomorrow. And I think that the conversation of trans inclusion is at the forefront of that conversation, because without trans inclusion, skateboarding is hollow. Like I said earlier, like a homogenous skateboarding is like not one to be celebrated. And so until then, I think those exclusive spaces and expanding those ideas as wide and as far as we can is what's going to get us there. And yeah, I think that that's really where the importance is held. And being able to like expand those ideas through amazing organizations like have been highlighted here today, and Skate Like a Girl, like I've seen so many people on the outside of transness like be able to become better allies and like share those ideas to other people that are allies that would not be listening to people had it not come from other cis men, really. And so I think that like the willingness and expansion of that idea is not only most powerful for us to be able to hold that space, but also like secondarily powerful. I might have just made that word up, but we're running with it. But it's powerful in a secondary way, to be able to expand that idea to somebody else who wouldn't have ever considered it or would have thought it was an illegitimate claim. So yeah, I'm not sure where I'm at on time, but I think that's what I've got to share. And thanks again for letting me speak.
No, you're doing great. Perfect on time. Okay, so there was / is another speaker, although the internet in Johannesburg is not reliable at all. So the speaker that was going to talk about all the amazing work that she's been doing in the Johannesburg context, which was going to be really interesting, can't connect to the internet. So that's not going to work. So one of our amazing colleagues, Vuyo, who wasn't directly doing lessons but was involved in the planning and kind of sort of managing the project, is going to talk to us, but she needs to park her car and have 5 minutes to think about what she's going to say. So in the meantime, firstly, I realized that I told everyone to introduce themselves and I didn't introduce myself. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll do a few questions, and then I'll get a message from Vuyo, and then she can speak for a little bit. So it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, but it will be fine. So my name's Amber, and I work for Goodpush, but I'm also one of the co-founders of Women Skate the World and part of New Wave Skate, which is a community-led queer skate in Amsterdam, but we're in the process of moving it over to where I'm based in the UK, and it kind of expanding it because a lot of cities that have seen the New Wave sessions have wanted to do that with their own sessions. So that's super exciting. I've worked in social skate work in various different roles for different organizations for the past few years. So that's my kind of background in skateboarding. But yeah, I really want to give everybody here a chance to ask questions, and like hopefully we can have like a really cool discussion. Feel free to chuck questions in the chat. You can also, if you want to, you can speak, maybe raise your hand, and I think Rhiannon's gonna manage the hand raising, I'm not sure. But yeah, does anybody have any questions that we can jump in with straight away?
We have a hand there from, I'm not sure that the buyer, is that correct? There?
Yeah, it's there. How's it going?
Hey.
Hey everyone, I'm in Colorado, part of Cornerstone Skate Foundation. And I wanted to direct this question towards Alexa. You had mentioned that people tend to listen to like the cis white man. That's who, especially like when it comes to allies, are trying to listen to someone's perspective. And I've definitely noticed that and experienced that here. So in our organization, there's 4 women and 1 man. 2 of us are part of the LGBTQI+ community, and we've been having a challenging time getting more people involved, specifically men, who want to do change. And so how can we help these people who have expressed interest and expressed that they're allies and they're really stoked on what we're doing? How can we help them feel empowered or like feel better prepared to have that conversation or be able to speak up in those situations where they are being listened to and we're not? So
so I think that's a really tough question for sure, because I know that it's like really hard to approach the idea of like, I'm the voice that is having the first person experience, but the person with the third person experience is going to have like a louder, more resonating voice. And so I know that that can like definitely be diminishing. So I think that one thing that is helpful for me personally and like in our organization is just being like able to, or not so much able, but I just try to be like as most upfront with people and like as direct and transparent with that communication. And sometimes it's hard because you're not heard. And being able to like utilize the voices of allies around you to try to like prop up that conversation to people who aren't maybe listening to what you have to say in the first place, like I think is a good practice, but ultimately isn't something that I would want to rely on, because if the people I'm trying to like organize and work with aren't allowing my voice to be heard, then I don't think I want to organize or work with those people. However, like I do want to allow people to like grow and be able to like learn and prosper and flourish with us. So it's a very like complicated question for sure. But like, yeah, I just try to make sure like we're uplifting the voices that are on the primary source of the experience first, and then like allowing those ally voices to help support whenever possible, but recognizing that some people are sometimes just not here to listen. And it can be a hard line to like differentiate, but that's a really good question. And I appreciate it. Hopefully that was helpful.
Definitely. I think that the last part, especially about some people are just not here to listen, it is so you need to pick your battles.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to some guys at the skate park and kind of giving, like saying, can we do this bit differently? Can we change this? And they were sort of saying, they're like, we're really open to it. We don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, just remember, even if it feels like whatever you do, you're doing something like wrong, or you're being told to do it in a different way. If I'm even having the conversation with you and putting time and energy into it, then I like believe in you and want you to do better and think that you can, because if I didn't, I just wouldn't talk to you. So I'm going to throw it over to Vuyo quickly, who's going to talk about what's been happening in Johannesburg. Sarah couldn't connect. I panicked. Vuyo said, I got you, and she did. So let's go over to Vuyo. Vuyo, are you there?
She's here. Can't hear her though.
Vuyo, is your audio working? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Hi, everyone. Sorry for that. My name is Vuyo. I'm the programs officer at Skateistan, South Africa. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about a project that we started this year. So Skateistan, South Africa is new to the idea of including children who exist outside the binary. So as an organization, we always knew that this is something we wanted to address, but we lacked the tools to do so. At first, we spent a lot of time being cautious about our approach and being right, you know, and we only realized actually when a student who presented as male asked to join the Global Girl Project, which focused on giving girl leadership, skills. He asked, can I please join the group? That was the day when we realized that we should rather try and fail than not to do anything at all. And so from there, we thought, okay, maybe to tackle this, let's involve the parent as well. We met with the parents during their parenting workshop, and we brought a speaker with the idea that we thought that this person is going to be open-minded. It's someone we all don't know, and but that didn't come out so well with the workshop, because the speaker was a little bit defensive and the parents felt like they were a little bit attacked because of obviously his past experiences when it comes to being received right in the society. So what we did was we thought, okay, now we need to research. We took it upon ourselves to do the necessary research and actually just engage with parents on this topic. We found that many of our parents wanted really to participate in these workshops, and they always had questions. So they were more than curious. They were curious more than distancing themselves, you know, so, but they were just lacking the right space to ask those questions. So it was a start, and that's how we started. And one of the learnings that we took out of that as the skate school was that our community of parents are not as, what's the right word, conservative as we assumed they would be, but our parents needed support just as the children needed. So in one of the workshops, children were just like, I can't believe that my mom is sitting and asking questions. I can't believe that I really wanted to have this conversation with my parent, but I couldn't do so. So it was just so beautiful to watch, because Skateistan created a safe space for both the children and their parents to actually be free and put their curiosity out in the world and get the right answers. As soon as that happened, parents requested for a second workshop where they wanted to find out from us, what is the right way? What is the right words? What are the right words to use? Like how do you pronounce certain things? And they really said, if they can, we can have classes, continuous classes with them, so that they can support their children in the right way, in their societies, even in places where they stay. Because and indeed, there were parents who came out and said, I want to admit, I want to take this moment and say, I acted out of not knowing. But I'm really grateful that now I am empowered, and I think I'm going to act better. So that's, and then COVID happened. We meant to have a really robust curriculum, even for the students. But then COVID-19 happened. We had to be away from students. It's only now we are picking up, and we are planning to have an event. And one of the things that our youth leaders had, an idea that they had, was to create a bench. So we are going to buy a second-hand bench, and then we're all going to paint it with the colors of inclusivity. And then everyone that sits in that chair, it's not going to be exclusive. So once you put your bag there, it means you are supporting, you are with us, you are one of us. So that's, sorry guys, I'll just say this is all I can say for now. I would have really loved to present more about the topic. I'm quite passionate about it. So thank you so much, Amber, for the opportunity.
Awesome, thank you so much. You saved my life a little bit there. So now let's go back to Q&A. If anybody has any questions, let's get the discussion going.
I think Allison had her hand raised before.
Oh, and where?
I did. It was a comment, but I did ask a question to, my comment was just the follow-up on the allyship. I don't want to shift, because I love hearing from Vuyo, especially because I was hearing about this before it happened, and it's really cool to hear the initiative that's happened. But I just wanted to say a conversation that I had, I've been having a couple of times recently about allyship, and what Alexa was saying about also being careful about who is taking that space and attention is just burden. I think it's also important for people who feel nervous about being an ally to talk to them about, if you have a space where you can take the burden from someone who is trans identified or queer identified and who is tired of explaining things and telling people what's up, then that is a really good role to play. And don't become the protagonist, but yes, try to ease that burden on the community. And I just wanted to add that. And can I ask my question to Alexa also? Is that okay? Alexa, I just wanted to ask, so cool what you all are doing. And how do you let the community, and especially young people, know about these exclusive spaces you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. So we have 4 different Instagram accounts for across our 3 chapters, which we primarily use. But one of the big things that especially loops in young people, especially because I know there are a lot of young people that aren't necessarily on Instagram, but we have functioned from a place primarily operating off of summer camps for a really long time. So once they sign up for those summer camps, we send out newsletters to allow them to know about the other programs that are being held. And yeah, it's a really good way to loop in youth from the summer camp into those WT programs, especially because a lot of the times the summer camp participants are introduced to the concept of like pronouns and like gender inclusivity. And you'll have someone who started summer camp who was like, what's pronouns? Okay, well, I guess I use he, him. By the end of summer camp, it's like, I use they, them pronouns. It's like, cool, I'll see you at WT then. So yeah, that's been a pretty good one, but between that and Instagram.
I have a question, and yeah, I guess this could be for any of the panelists who are doing programs, but like how important is it if people want to run a program? Like I know a lot of skateboarding projects are doing like, they've been doing girls and women sessions, and then they want to expand it to be something more welcoming to to queer skaters or trans skaters. Like how important is it to get the right language when kind of advertising those sessions? Or is it like, I don't know, should we maybe like feel sometimes like people get held back from doing something because they feel like they're going to do it wrong? I don't know, like how do you get that like right balance of like getting the language right so that people are going to feel like it's something for them? And I know also sometimes people feel like they don't want to just be like tacked on with something else, kind of. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, in this, I just want to add on that because like we're facing that at the moment. We have like a night at the local skate park, and I coach there and I teach a lot of little girls. So I'm always saying to the girls and the parents, like, you should come to this night. It's like, it's all women and girls, but it's also a queer space. And so in talking to the queer community, it's saying, well, it's invalidating for our identity to be like girls, women and queer. Like, again, it's othering, it's like and other. So like one of the advice that we got was like, okay, well, why don't you call it like marginalized genders, which works for the queer community, but isn't obvious to parents of little girls that haven't been introduced to this concept yet, that it's for them as well. And all of this, like, there's work to be done, but all of this is happening in the context of us like just being on the cusp of it being viable for the skate park to give us the skate park for the night. So it's like trying to navigate that at the same time as being like, we can do all this work, but first we need to get people in, because unless like at the moment they're losing money, which it's a business. And so it's trying to kind of persuade everybody to be there and know and say like, we don't have it right yet and we're going to work on it. I was thinking just while you're talking then that it'd actually be a really good opportunity to educate parents and kids and introduce them to it. But yeah, sometimes it feels like quite a balancing act, and just wanting to make sure it's an inclusive space for everyone.
While we were doing the research that Alison was leading, we interviewed some of our participants. We basically asked them, why did you come, and then we asked them about language and what language we should be using, because at the moment our language is it just feels a little bit clunky. We're trying to do the right thing, but we haven't got a really good way of doing it for people who identify as female or non-binary participants can choose. It's just it's and actually what two of our participants said is that, why don't you just shove a trans flag on there, or why don't you just use better imagery, or why don't you make sure that the people who are doing the recruiting are relatable, their language is good, and actually, so I think that there are better ways of doing it and more creative. I think that we can be a bit creative in that space, really, around how we market what we do. And it could be, I think that imagery is a really important thing. And the feedback that we had was about use, signs, use messaging. It doesn't have to be all words, and we don't have to get hung up on it necessarily.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to speak to this as well, just because this is something that I specifically have being like a trans woman specifically as well. Like I see inside sports spaces for sure. Like I see something that's advertised for women and I'm like, all right, I see you, but like, are you going to be is this going to be okay for me to show up in? So like the conversation around language here, I think is like definitely important. And I kind of wanted to share what's gone on with Skate Like a Girl, because I mentioned our WT sessions. Those used to be called Ladies Night, and there was a little asterisk that was like women and trans people, like not gender non-conforming people, always welcome. But like that by proxy kind of flew by the wayside. So it got changed to women and trans sessions, which then like received some like negative feedback from the trans community, being that there was like an implication that you couldn't be both. And so now we've kind of landed on women and or trans sessions, which is just kind of a mouthful. And like we've shortened it to WT sessions. But something I kind of want to highlight with that story is that like language is developing at such a rate, like especially like inclusive language is always going so quickly. So I think that something that was previously mentioned by Kat was too, that like having your cultural values of your organization and like what it is, the event that you're holding, and being able to use other imagery and things that like signify, like for Skate Like a Girl, I trust that our community knows our like inclusive mission enough to know that like we are always going to allow trans people in like women's spaces, so to speak, you know, because like if you're a trans woman, you're a woman, this is implied, right? So it's like, at what point do we stop putting asterisks and like other things and not just let it be that thing? And I think that that answer really comes with like the lead of your cultural values. But yeah, thanks.
There's
Go for it, dude.
no, Brody, I was just gonna say there's some hands up. So yeah, you can go ahead, and then maybe we can hear from Chantal after.
I'm happy to step aside.
Just keep going.
Okay. Okay. The German language is very interesting, as though it is mainly romantic languages are generally gendered. So problematic, number one. I love to talk with asterisks. When I moved here, I was like, what's this asterisk about? But that's like the German version of inclusion, or they add like a INNEN after. And what the queer community in this city has continued to do is continue to make, which I really appreciate. Every time I see a poster, I'm like, oh, I wonder what that, not an acronym, but like I guess an acronym. Ooh, I don't know. But anyways, there's a community, as language continues to develop, instead of LGBTQIA+, in this town, there's been a very large presence of a general large group of marginalized experienced people consider themselves Flint, which is like female, lesbian, intersex, non-binary, and trans. And just the other day, I saw another letter attached to the end, but I just can't remember. And that's how beautiful, and one of the main reasons I live in this town. Because guerrilla advertising is like, we have social media, powerful, works every time, but it's like the ether, you know what I mean? Like I get a lot more from the people I surround myself with, and like that social consciousness stuff that I can pick up from advertising, you know. And as much as advertising is toxic and often non-exclusionary and often very like tropey and can be very harmful, I've learned a lot from living in this town and having to, because I come from a non-gendered language, and so there's a lot to learn. Like when someone asks what's your pronoun in German, it's like there isn't one that works. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Brody. Chantal has a hand up here from Queer Skate.
Yeah, I don't want to get the conversation off of language too much, because I think it's a really interesting topic that we all need to talk about. But a little bit of a statement and then a question. And it goes back to Alexa saying that a lot of these queer programs should be, or maybe need to be, directed towards kids. When I started doing the Queer Skate Toronto stuff, I thought it was going to be me and my buddies and maybe a couple of new people. But the amount of kids and teenagers that show up makes up the mass majority of people that show up, which is amazing. I have, moms messaging me about their 10-year-old gender fluid kids finding their best friend that they didn't know existed. And I think it's really nice to open up those spaces to those kids. So if anyone has the opportunity to do that in their town, or if they're running programs, If the kids aren't there, maybe try to open it up to them because they definitely want it. And then my question was, running a program and starting something like this, often people message and they want to collaborate or join or work together. And how do you field those messages and find the right people to work with? Or, do you not for a while? Do you build up your own, image, not image, but, group yourself? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so for Skate Like a Girl, we have kind of our executive director, who is Kristen Ebeling, and she's been super tied into the skate industry for a really long time. So we're like really lucky to have her because she's very well aware of like all the moving pieces and like who's doing what. But I would say like in my own experience and what I've been a part of with Skate Like a Girl, I think it's kind of just important to kind of like start conversations about, well, what is it that you want to do in this collaboration? And like maybe even just like touching base prior and really having an opportunity to define like their values and like what their initiative is with doing this collaboration. Because you're I definitely see where you're coming from with that, because there are a lot of times where we'll get reached out to and it's like, this is interesting, like I'm not sure why this is here. And I think like a lot of the times those for me have been really clarified by like having some FaceTime and being able to like ask some of those questions transparently up front. Because ultimately at the end of the day, like if we're not allowed to be on the same page about those things, I don't think that the collaboration is going to be like worthwhile in the end. So I always want to make sure like we're going to click with what our core values are and what it is that you're hoping to bring into the collaboration as an outside contributor.
Cool, thank you.
I've just seen a question from Kira in the chat. Kira, do you want to ask that?
Yeah, so I've just started my first job. It's at a skate park, and the girls' nights that are held by the skate park are marketed as girls' nights, no kind of asterisk, small print at the bottom. And they run from like 5 till 10 maybe, but between 8 and 10 and 5 and 6, it's open to the public. And I'm not sure how to go about starting the conversation, having to, explain to 10 cishet white men why there's an issue, how to fix the issue as someone who's worked there for 3 weeks. So if anybody's got any ideas, then please help. Oh, also, yeah, I'm 17 and I've just moved to the city that I'm in. So new to the skate scene, new to everything. And yeah, in desperate need of advice, please.
Yeah, so just for a clarifying point, did you say that you were working at that skate shop or that you're just like going as a participant?
Yeah, I work there, but only part-time.
Oh, got you. I definitely think like it can be daunting, especially like having those conversations, stepping into somebody's space, like us inserting yourself like as that, like mentioned earlier, kind of that other. And defining like what it is that you think is wrong about the space, but also like remember that that space is their attempt at catering something to you or to those communities that they're trying to be inclusive about, even if they're just kind of like tipping the iceberg, so to speak. So like something that I find that's really helpful would be maybe find a few like-minded individuals in your community that like you skate with. They can co-sign an email with you or like help you word that. And starting with an email, just like maybe just from you, since you're like working there, and being like, hey, these are some thoughts I've had about like our girls' night, things that we can do to make it more inclusive. And then like, depending upon the response you get, if they're like, hey, that's great, we want to go ahead and listen to you on this and like prop that up, cool, that's great, we're moving forward. But then if you get a negative response, maybe you already have a pool of people that you've talked to about this prior, that you can kind of like push that initiative forward to the next step of like, hey, here's a petition that all these people have signed, or like, here's something we posted on Instagram with like a thing. Like there's a lot of routes to take, but I know that like, I really appreciate what you have to say, because that first step is definitely the hardest, but as soon as you take it, you're running. So like, I hear you, and I wish you the best with that.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Cool. There's I don't know if anyone else wants to add on that, but I think that's awesome that you're new in town and you're wanting to push for change already. So we have another question here about signage. How would signage work at the skate park? Someone says, for example, this is why we created this safe space. Sorry, I'm not explaining very well. Juliana, do you want to just say your question? You comfortable doing that?
Sure, yeah. Am I on here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What I was just actually replying to the worker at the skate park. And I thought, you know, if people could just point to a sign when some cisgender male says, well, what's up with this inclusivity stuff? You can just say, this is why we find that this is important. And that takes the onus off of the worker to just point to the rules basically and say, we feel that this is needs to be a safe space and a designated safe space for those people. So the signs are, you know, graphically speaks to that. Okay.
Great, cool. Thanks for speaking, because I didn't know if that was a question or comment. That's helpful. Amber, I don't know if you can see the hands up now. Can you?
No, is that?
Okay, there's one here from Zoe Corwin.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I'm actually one of Neftali Williams' colleagues at USC on the skate study. And I wanted to just respond to the question about, because it sounded like, I think it was Kiara who is, I couldn't tell if you were not a skater or not. It sounded like you're definitely new to that situation and you're a non-skater. And as a non-skater who's a huge advocate for skateboarders, you know, I think it's so critical for us to change the narrative and help non-skaters or, you know, cis white men skaters understand different perspectives. And that's definitely something that's come out in our research, is that, you know, even skateboarders, white male skateboarders, cis men who were down to be allies, they're oblivious, right? Because they've never had to think about different identities or different skate experiences. So we've been playing around with like video narratives. And I guess I would just encourage you to be maybe creative in how you're trying to change narratives and share different perspectives. So those guys coming to the skate park, they might give you pushback and just want to see, you know, they're not going to really respond to like, are they even going to get an email? But maybe if you could work with someone in your community to do like some cool like video content and get that out on Instagram. I think we got to be innovative in the ways that we're trying to change narratives. Just a comment and just much gratitude to everyone on the Zoom.
Amber, there was a question, maybe this would be actually a good one for Vuyo. Someone was saying, I was wondering about the issue of working with parents. We have a number of young people whose parents aren't supportive and would love some good practice on how to work with them. Yeah, that sounds like if Vuyo's here, maybe she could answer that one.
She might be driving again.
Oh yeah, true.
Hi, Anna. Can you please repeat the question for me, please?
Yeah, so Catrin was asking about the working with parents, and she says we have a number of young people whose parents aren't supportive and would love some good practice on how to work with them.
So I really think that sometimes we need to look at why are the parents not supportive. I think also to start with empowering the parents first before they engage into supporting the children, because sometimes I've realized that working with parents, it's just that sometimes it's not like they're not supportive because they choose to be not supportive, but they are lacking the right information. So I think having one-on-one sessions with them and just to motivate the importance of being there for your child. Parents don't know how to be supportive because nobody has been supportive for themselves. So to just touch base and to speak to their younger selves as well, it helps. What would you tell your younger self if you were a parent, and then take that knowledge now and apply it to your child who's needing your support? So just providing a safe space for parent, it helps. If once they see that there's a place that is just willing to listen to them without judgment and also is there to support them, it really has helped a lot. We did have those kind of parents as well, but with the right support, they came in, we saw them engaging and being the right support for their children.
Cool, thanks, Vuyo. And then we had a hand here, a couple hands here. We have Alec Beck, maybe first, and then Juliana.
Hey, folks. I had a kind of a quick two-parter. I mean, as a cis white male trying to figure out how to best support how we can, and being in a position of privilege and some responsibility in generating some materials about how to create effective skate space in your community and advocate for skate space. The first part of the question is for Kara. When you mentioned your original question, you said that there's the ladies' night, even though there's no mention of the other parts, and that they're allowing guys to come in and skate during that session, right? That's kind of what the question was. And this is, I'm still learning, so forgive me, but the notion of if the skate park is big enough to allow for you to have the space for that session while having the guys go in an area that you're not particularly interested in, so you can have enough space to ride. I think there's a risk of, and again, forgive me if I'm saying this the wrong way, but the notion of inadvertently creating some form of misguided resentment from them towards this type of good inclusive space that you're creating and it's needed. If there's a way to share the space where you can help them understand, this is something that is incredibly valuable for these reasons. And Dr. Neftali Williams on the last Goodpush session mentioned that these skaters, for the most part, skateboarders all share that understanding of being kicked out for no good reason or something like that. And so helping them to understand that this, you need that space in a way that is going to be helpful. But that conversation about whether or not is the space big enough to share that space for that moment. They can go over to this section while y'all are skating this thing. Or if it's not, skate the whole park. I think that's a reasonable approach, certainly. But to that, the second part of the question is the notion of signage that Juliana brought up. We're in the process of generating some materials to help with this public skate park development. And we're doing our best to help write about how, and this is the type of thing that somebody would, if they're looking to develop a public skate park in their community, they would get the long and short of it in a brief PDF, and trying to lay the groundwork for these spaces as being inclusive, and how do we write about that in a way that works, and how do we illustrate around that. And Una brought up an interesting point in the chat about the term traditional and non-traditional skateboarders. And I don't know what the general feeling is about that. And I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts, because I could see why some people would think that's great and some people would not necessarily like to be labeled as that one way or the other. So I'm just kind of putting that out there to see if anybody has any thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to speak to both of your points as well,
Please.
if I might. Something that I think is important that I've witnessed with Skate Like a Girl is the going back to a point I was making earlier about like the inclusive and exclusive spaces is kind of the cornerstone of what those spaces look like. Because if WT night was set in a way where we had to share the space with men who are at ATS, Altogether Skate Park, we would be quickly overrun. And I think that the parameters around like who defines like what area of the park someone might not be interested in. And also I think like the biggest value to an exclusive space is walking in and knowing that you don't exist among any of the eyes as the other. Like knowing that I'm walking in and being greeted by my community solely, so I don't have anything to be anxious about, is really like what those kind of programs have brought value into my life specifically. Because if I knew that there were like even just a few men in those, like that's kind of become a sacred space for a lot of people. And so like knowing that there's like eyes of a few men there like would make it really difficult for a lot of people to skate, especially those of us who are like in the beginners area. And then to speak to the non-traditional skater thing, that's one of my favorite kind of like ways that it's been phrased recently, because it really resonates with me in a couple ways, being that like non-traditional skaters almost sounds redundant because skateboarding in and of itself has always struck me as like non-traditional. But now there's like a traditional culture that we kind of have barred ourselves up against, or rather that they've barred up themselves up against us. And we are like the counterculture to the counterculture. And so like, I think that for me, like that's always resonated, and non-traditional skaters is a lot more pleasing to the ear than everyone but cis men. So like, yeah, I definitely am in support.
Thank you, Alexa.
Just aware we're almost out of time here, and Juliana's had her hand up. So if, maybe a last comment or question. You want to unmute there?
Yeah, just quickly then, I'm actually struggling with our tagline, which is empowering women through skateboarding. And we really are looking to make that a little bit more inclusive. We are an inclusive organization and always have been. And I think that the community feels that and knows that. But I want to make sure that in our language going forward, the welcome mat is out there. So if anyone would like to continue that conversation with me, please feel free to contact me, and I'll put my email in the chat, and then you guys can just reach out to me, and that'd be just fine, because I really would like to have this conversation, and frankly, I don't know where to start. So I appreciate your time. Thank you. This is a wonderful experience.
Right. Amber, is there any final things you want to cover? Or
no, I think that's great. It's been really great to have you all here. Thank you for such an awesome discussion. And yeah,
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
First off, thank you everybody so much for your time. I feel like it's been incredibly helpful. If there are a few more additional questions, is there a way we can connect after this? I know that everybody's busy, but right now is a good time for some of us. So I was hopeful that the conversation could continue a little bit longer.
yeah, if people want to stay, we can keep this room open for like another, I don't know, half an hour or something, if anyone wants to stick around.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend that's listening that is working up the courage to ask, or maybe just type it in the.
Yeah. And for anyone who has to leave, and of course, please go ahead, and including panelists and guests, we really appreciate having you here. It's been amazing. So, but yeah, we can keep this open for those who want to stick around a bit.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah, you can share their contacts in the chat if you want to.
Yeah. Should I should I just stop recording for this bit, just for the more informal thing, or keep it going? What's helpful?
I'm happy for it to be recorded, but I don't.
There might be questions that people ask now.
Oh yeah.
Will be helpful.
Okay.
Cool. I saw, just in response to you, Juliana, there was I think it was Alexa had a suggestion for a tagline. What was it? I think it was like empowering non-traditional skateboarders or something like that. Also we had a similar thing personally at the Goodpush Alliance that I work on in Skateistan. We run, the last couple of years, we've been running a program called Role Models, which is like a women's leadership program where we support them to run skateboarding projects geared at girls. But we wanted it to be more open. And so we did our advertising and stuff using women with an X. And that was like our approach, although we have, like Alexa mentioned, like language is always changing. And for some people, yeah, that's not a term that they associate with, but yeah, that was our approach, to be like, to try to put some kind of like a signal out there that this was inclusive. But I really liked the comment from Catrin about how maybe we can do this through imagery as well as language. Yeah. And Alex handed up.
Pardon me for continuing to talk so much. This is all very helpful, and I really appreciate all the perspectives with that. And is Alexa still in here? She may have, they may have popped out, but her great response about that space made me wonder if, and I imagine a lot of people are doing this already, but the part of me wants to see more of the interactions where there's this safe space for skaters to, non-traditional skaters to be able to be there and be themselves without being considered the other, or and just feel how they need to feel, but also wanting to get everybody else who maybe would be considered traditional skaters, whatever we want to call them, to see that, engage with that, to engage with them as they should, like it's the normal day at the skate park. So that the concept of like an allyship night in addition to these other inclusive, exclusive skate spaces, but having one where the people can come, everybody can come together. And I'm not advocating for more skate spaces for, you know, cis men, you know what I mean? But in terms of creating that space where it's not just one or the other, but in addition to that, where you can feel as comfortable as you want, there's also this space where it perhaps helps the people who haven't had that lived experience to come in and engage in a way that is a little bit more proactive and intentional. I don't know if that's helpful or a thought, but
I think that's super helpful. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Amber. Go ahead.
Go for it. Go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, in our experience here, it's really resonating off of what you just said, Alec, because we started kind of, long story short, we started from a space where a lot of women that I skate with were sexually assaulted and harassed. And so that's how the conversation started. And ultimately, there are a lot of programs here that do direct directly towards like women, and also different programs that direct specifically to queer skaters and that sort of thing. And so we were really excited to be in a position where we were friends with all these groups. We already attended these other meetups, these other nights, and we noticed that a lot of our, I guess what you would say, like the more traditional skateboarders, we would see them at the skate parks, but we would never see them at these events. So we kind of took our approach is that like we want to be able to connect to these people and get them in the same room and get them having a conversation, get them taking a yoga class together, because otherwise they would never be able to relate with this person who they think they have all these differences with. So I completely agree with like being able to have a space not only that's exclusive, but then and safe, but then partnering it with maybe another night where people feel emboldened that they already know a couple people there from these exclusive nights, and then they can go over and meet these more traditional, intimidating, masculine, angry people. But that kind of brings me back to my friend Abby's question in the chat. a man in her community is very excited about what she's doing in her board shop and everything like that, and he wants to ride for them. He doesn't want to ride for their male counterpart shop, and she's kind of in a position where she doesn't know if it makes sense to allow him to be on this girls team, or if like maybe there's a space. I like Talia's point that maybe he can be an advocate and an ally and be able to have those tough conversations because he's in that position. So maybe we can speak on that part too.
Yeah, I think like you said, making sure that it's in addition to other nights. And I mean, at the skate park that I work at, like I'm no expert, but I've said to all of the staff there, they are really open, but I've said to all of them, look, if you have questions or you're not sure, like I'm happy to talk to you about it. Like you don't need to just instantly know everything. If you're not sure, ask. And they've been pretty open with that. And also there was one guy who was pretty problematic, who I said, he's not at any of these events again. And they just were like, yeah, fine. Like, so that was good. I guess the risk is wherever, like even, I remember it happened even at Pushing Borders, which was like all about like inclusive and listening to different perspectives. And there was one point where straight after a talk, there was meant to be like a women's skate session. And because like skaters do what they're not supposed to do and like push the rules, men just completely took it over. And it was a big effort to try and get that space and get people to respect the fact that they weren't allowed to skate it, even though, yes, we were all stood in a skate park and yes, they were really cool ramps. So I guess it's hard. Like it would be great to do that, and I'm sure that there's a way, but I think that it will take a lot of work, a lot of planning. Not to say that means you shouldn't do it. I think absolutely, but the risk would be that men will just come and go like, oh yeah, you're allowed to go, and just not engage with any of that side of it. Mm-hmm. And like I say, the way around that is a lot of work, a lot of time and energy, kind of having those conversations, working out who is invested in this and who isn't. I think a lot of people have had this, like whenever you say that you're putting on any kind of like women's night or queer night, so many guys are like, oh yeah, so if I wear a dress, can I come? And like you just have to be like, if you identify as a woman, then you're absolutely welcome here, yeah. But if you don't and you just want to take up more space as a white cis man, that's on you. And like they kind of go, I'm only joking, like, but like, you know what I mean? It's hard, but men will take over space wherever they can. So it's trying to have those conversations and create that space for that conversation to happen without just opening the door to the space being taken over, I guess.
Totally. Can't let it overshadow the whole point of the space.
Exactly. Yeah. Do we have any more like questions? Or?
There was a very active chat happening here. So if anyone who's been typing in the chat wants to kind of speak a little bit about, I don't know if Indigo is still here, but she had quite an interesting perspective on the non-traditional skater thing. There's a lot of interesting comments in there. So I open it, like I would want to open it to anyone who feels keen to kind of speak a little bit, because and the people can't see the chat in the recording, unfortunately.
I'll jump in then if no one's speaking. I several times heard reference to asterisks being used as an inclusive symbol. And I'm wondering, for me, as a totally straight white lady, right, a plus sign seems more inclusive and inviting. Is that, however, the asterisk to my mind is something that sets things apart. And maybe that's the point. So I'm kind of wanting to get some thoughts from the group on pluses versus asterisks and where these things fall. I mean, I know this is all about the ever-changing language, and the difficulty with that. But I kind of agree that non-traditional skater does not work for a lot of people. So I want to be careful with that, especially if we are going to move forward as exposure, being more inclusive in the way that we address things. So asterisks or pluses, that's my big old question.
Hey, hi, sorry, I'm in my pajamas because it's nighttime here, and so I haven't got my video on. It's indigo. So maybe Juliana, we're talking about it in the last session as well, like maybe if you have like the funds, maybe putting together like a focus group and just trying out some different ideas, maybe showing what you think you would like to use and what other people feel comfortable with, including, empowering non-traditional skaters, and yeah, getting sort of a range of views and maybe going from there as well. So focus groups are just really great. Being a researcher, I really enjoy them simply because panels like this are amazing. But at the same time, there's only sort of a limited amount of people that can be on the panel. So maybe, run a few focus groups in different geographic locations, different groups. I don't know, it's just a suggestion. Something that I would love to do with Consent is Rad as well, just for focus groups, get more ideas in.
Yeah, Indigo, actually, you mentioned that you rebranded from Girls Skate Brisbane to We Skate Queensland. So did you use kind of focus groups or like a kind of a poll or something with your members, or how did you come up with that?
Yeah, so we initially tried to put the name out there on our Instagram and try and get some comments. And it was so popular, like, we said, we're going to launch this other group called We Skate Brisbane as opposed to Girls Skate Brisbane. And because people were so positive to it amongst the group, we just decided, well, let's just change the name of this group rather than creating a special group to, be more inclusive. Let's just change this group. And, the process of doing that was great because, the symbolism that we use and the type of people that we show kind of, sort of dictates what kind of a space we're making. And when we need to, if we say we've got funding just for, coaching girls, we can say that. But I guess just the way changing it from girls to we, WE, just kind of helped us, and it was received very positively. But it might not suit everybody, and everybody, like they said, we kind of put it out there. Thank you.
Cool. I'm just seeing if there was any questions or anything in the chat that we didn't cover. I feel like we covered most of the things. If there's anything else, oh yeah, so yeah, on the topic of the non-traditional skater, so we had a mix where some people were like, yes, I really like this, and then others, for example, we have a comment from Zoe that says that this can run the risk of erasing experiences of skaters from minoritized backgrounds who have been in it since day one. Yeah, and there's, yeah, I think a few comments related to that. And I think also, like, I mean, maybe this could be a good thing or a bad thing, but non-traditional, I mean, that can cover all kinds of things. It can cover ability levels. It can cover, yeah, if people feel like, being a skater of color is then fits in non-traditional. So it can be very broad. It can be, I think, a nice term, but it depends on the person. And that's the thing with language. So yeah, these visual aids like the rainbow and the flags and stuff were actually a really good idea that people brought up. And then we have a response on the asterisk here from Allison. The asterisk has been used in trans literature and by some in the community to make it clear that it is inclusive of more than one trans identity, similar to using an X or an like @ symbol, and there's a lot of history there. So I think that's an argument in favor of the asterisks.
Sorry, I was being lazy, so I just typed it. I just wanted to add, it's not to say yes or no. It's to say, to follow up on language is always changing, acronyms are always changing. And I think it's what's relevant to your community, Juliana, honestly. Like if you're working with a specific community in a specific context in a state in the United States, that's really different than, for example, what my community here in Spain would use. So, yeah.
I just wanted to ask, I know this session is being recorded, but is it going to be shared more widely, or would there be an appetite to co-produce some, I don't know, stuff on why this is important and how it's done, and some good practice around, just some of just sharing some of the gems that have come out of tonight, because there's so many of you doing such incredible things that I think that it would be a shame not to share that more widely with people who really want to do this stuff, who again wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah, definitely. I know that New Wave is working on putting something together, but I mean, I think that could be a collaboration. Like, why not? I think it'd be really cool to do something like that.
If I could just jump in here, I think that's critical. And I know that, whenever we come out with a research piece, we get pinged by so many different organizations to amplify what we've shared. So I think there's a real appetite right now to expand people's understanding of just about everything. So I think that would be amazing. And one of my takeaways from this conversation is just this really important and tricky tension between what the last speaker just said about knowing your audience and targeting your message to that audience, and then times when you want to go broader. So I'll just give you one example from the education literature that we've been working on, which is it's actually now officially in the California State Education and Penal Code. We've changed the term from at-risk students to at-promise students. So students are no longer supposed to be referred to as at-risk, rather they're referred to as at-promise, which was really important because it takes away the deficit framing, which, some of the terms that sometimes are like, skaters from marginalized backgrounds, unfortunately that's using it, a deficit framing, even though that is, the reality. And so sometimes it's really helpful to have those overarching frameworks like at promise, and then other times we need the nuance to highlight the experiences of trans skaters or skaters from different minoritized backgrounds. So I guess that's not a question, just a comment and an exclamation point that I'm left thinking about a lot of what we discussed, and excited to amplify whatever the deliverables from this.
Yeah, absolutely. We also just had a really good suggestion from Natalie that we should all use the hashtag folks of shred more. Which I really like that one. Oh, Alec, I can see hands now. That's cool. Alec, have you got a question?
Yes, sorry to keep opening my mouth. Speaking of deliverables and this type of collective, I feel like we're noticing really, really great work in specific areas, right? They're localized regional programs and events and things like that. We're focused nationally on skate park advocacy and grant funding and things like that, but we do see a lot. If we're seeing, we all know the problem at the skate park with the kids who are being punks, the Lord of the Flyout syndrome, right? They're developing humans who are trying to learn how to be human. I wonder if it's worth being so bold to suggest something where there's a tiny bit of backstory with this concept of, the kids are out of control. How do we help them? If it's an unsupervised space, do we consider a parents' hour or something like that, where parents go? And that's not really the point, but the concept of maybe a networking thing in terms of an allyship hour or two, or a session where it's global or national, where it's one part of the week or one day where every one of these players gets together and declares that this is when, we're going to the skate park to be there for each other. I don't know if that's appropriate, just throwing it out there and trying to think big in a way that maybe puts it on blast to folks who aren't necessarily following the regional or local groups that are doing all the real hard work. Just a thought. And I see there are obvious risks to doing that. And then how do you identify yourself as a part of that group when you're at the skate park during those hours? But it looks like there are a lot of groups that are doing, highlight your, Max, great point, highlight your local activists. Absolutely. Just wondering if there's something that we can do to connect these things in a way that is elevates and amplifies the message of inclusion at these spaces.
I have, maybe just one idea. It could be partnering together with some of these great organizations that already have these communities and already are working together with them and have these kind of sessions that they're running with these the communities to, you know, have people feel comfortable coming to the skate park and stuff. Maybe like then having an event where like some, you know, one of these organizations can like bring their community to a wider skate event or something as well, you know, or I don't know. That's just an idea, but maybe I'm also fading a bit.
I mean, that's what you're doing right now too. Thank you for this. This is incredibly helpful to have this stuff put together like this.
Cool. So I think we will wrap it up there, but it's been awesome to see all the all the enthusiasm, and even though this is I don't know how often we'll have a Goodpush Summit. We do regularly have Goodpush webinars. So this is the topic we could talk about again in the future for sure. I think there's a lot of, a lot more to discuss. So thank you everybody for sharing and asking questions, and yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been awesome. It's been a really great discussion. Bye.
Thank you.